Bueno, hola, estudiantes a distancia. Aprendemos hoy del subjuntivo presente. Por favor, saquen los apuntes. Vamos a escribir los apuntes. Pues, el subjuntivo presente. This is a red letter day because so far we've just used the indicative mood. We are learning an entirely new mood today in Spanish. Not just a new verb tense, but a mood. And you're probably thinking, I don't even know what that means. So I'm going to keep going. Here we go. The subjunctive mood. It's not a tense. It's used to say that one person influences the actions of another. It is not a tense, which refers to when an action takes place, like in the past, in the present, in the future. So far, we've been using the indicative mood in Spanish. So when we've learned the present tense, the preterite, the imperfect, the present progressive, the present perfect, we've been learning the indicative mood. And I and your other Spanish teachers didn't even mention this was the indicative mood because it was irrelevant at that point. It was just, that's what we were learning. In Spanish and in English as well, the indicative mood is used to talk about facts, what is actually happening right now, what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. The subjunctive mood is used to talk about what should happen or what should have happened or what is recommended to happen, but might not actually happen because it's just a recommendation. So in the subjunctive, they also have the present and the imperfect of the subjunctive, but this year we're only learning the present tense of the subjunctive in order to give recommendations. That's really what we're learning about this chapter. For example, recomendamos que ustedes hablen con un agente de viajes. We recommend that you guys talk with a travel agent. So we are recommending, we are influencing you guys, ustedes. ¿Quiere usted que escribamos nuestros nombres en las maletas? Do you want that we write our names on the suitcases? That's a recommendation. You want that we write. So this is in the subjunctive because somebody else is influencing our actions. Spanish subjunctive sentences have two parts, each with a different subject. Subjects are yo, tú, él, nosotros, ellos. And those two parts of the sentence are connected by the word que in between. Here it is. Recomendamos que. Quiere usted que. Oops. Que is a really multi-use word in Spanish because it has so many different meanings and usages. We know that if it has an accent mark, it can be a question word, right? What? Like, what are you doing? Que haces? It can mean than, if you're making a comparison, like more than, less than. It can also mean that, and in this case, it means that. We recommend that. Do you want that? Bueno, so here's the example. She suggests that I learn French. So this first part is in the present indicative, which is just the present tense that we learned when you were in Spanish 1. She suggests. Ella sugiere. Here it says sugiere, suggest, but it could be a prohibition, it could be a recommendation. Ella recomienda, ella prohíbe. And the second part of the sentence is in the subjunctive. And that's about what should or shouldn't happen according to this recommendation or suggestion. And the word que links the two ideas. Again, here's the format. First, we have subject number 1, and then a verb in the indicative, which we learned in Spanish 1, just the present tense, like I want. Then we have the word that, que, and then we have a verb in the subjunctive with a different subject. Here's some more examples. For example, I want that you sing. In English, we would say, I want you to sing. He suggests that I study. Recomendamos que él salga. We recommend that he leave. In English, we don't use the subjunctive mood a whole lot. It exists in English, but there's other ways that we phrase things that we don't really need it. Oftentimes as well, the subjunctive in English looks exactly identical to the indicative in English, so it's hard to tell which one we're using. However, this last one is a good example of a sentence that could be in English and would use the subjunctive in English. We recommend that he leave. If I was just saying, he's leaving, he leaves. In English, I would write, he leaves. Right? He leaves. That's just a fact. It's in the present tense, it's in the indicative mood. But if I recommend that he leave, in English, we conjugate that a little bit differently. I recommend that he leave. He leave is the subjunctive mood in English. If this was just a statement of fact, it would be bad English, right? He leave. He leave now. You sound like a caveman. It just doesn't sound right. But if I suggest that he leave or I recommend that he leave, it sounds better, right? Hopefully. Does that sound better to you? Maybe? Hopefully. So in English, we do use the subjunctive, but it's not quite as frequent. Continuamos. Here are a whole bunch of verbs in Spanish that are oftentimes followed by the subjunctive mood. A lot of these you already know, and we've talked about, and some others are cognates, and you can probably guess what they mean, right? And then pedir is not on your paper, but it's a good one to add because it's also kind of common. Pedir, you might remember from Spanish 1 when you were learning about ordering food in a restaurant, means to order or to ask for. So oftentimes, these verbs are used in the present indicative, the present tense that we learn in Spanish 1. But then the next phrase, if they're followed by K and then another phrase, they're usually followed by the subjunctive. For example, if you're a distance learner, I have uploaded this to Google Classroom, so please do feel free to download it, print it out. I think I also left a copy of this for you when you did the last materials pickup, so hopefully you do have a paper copy already. Okay, so we're not going to do the whole thing today. Instead, we're going to flip to the page that says 286 to practice a little bit identifying the subjunctive. Está aquí. In the top corner, it says 8A, 3A. In the bottom corner, 286. Las instrucciones dicen, Parte A, read the following sentences. In each sentence, underline the verb that shows the one person is trying to influence the action of another, the present indicative, and circle the verb that indicates what the other person should do, the present subjunctive. Follow the model. And the model is, my teacher permits that we work in groups. So permits is the word that shows the teacher is influencing the actions of another. Trabajemos is what the other person should do, what we should do. Número uno, the travel agent suggests that they visit La Paz. So the verb that shows influence is sugiere, suggests. And the verb that tells what the other people should do is visiten. If you haven't already, work ahead, take 30 seconds, do the rest on your own, and then we'll correct them once you have a chance to think through it on your own. Corregimos. The customs agent insists that you have your passport in your hand. Insiste indicates influencing another person, and tengas is what the other person should do. The siblings need that the parents board with them. Necesitan is in the indicative. Abordan is in the subjunctive. El piloto les dice a los pasajeros que apaguen los teléfonos celulares. The pilot tells the passengers, that they turn off their cell phones. Dice y apaguen. El tío recomienda que nosotros facturemos el equipaje temprano. Our uncle recommends that we check the luggage early. Recomienda, facturemos. We also use the subjunctive with impersonal expressions that give advice to a specific person or people. And you've seen a lot of these words before. It's important that, it's necessary that, it's better that, it's good that. Oftentimes, after these phrases, we'll see the subjunctive used. But if there's no specific person or people that's mentioned in the advice, then we just use the infinitive of the next verb. So, for example, in order to be a good tourist, it's important to be very polite. There's no specific person or people mentioned in this first sentence, so we're just using the infinitive verb and there's no K. But if I'm telling you it's important that you are a polite tourist, you're a specific person that I'm giving advice to. So I include the word K and I conjugate the next verb in the subjunctive mood. Practicamos un poquito con esto. So far, we're just practicing when do we use the subjunctive. We're not so worried right now about the forms of this. 302. In the top corner, it says 8B2. Letra C. Read the following sentences. Write S for specific if the sentence mentions specific people. Write G for general if it does not mention specific people. Follow the models. Modelo 1. Es necesario ser puntual. There's no K, QUE, and there's no specific person mentioned, so this is just general advice. It's necessary to be prompt. If I say it's necessary that you guys are prompt or punctual, es necesario que ustedes sean puntuales. This is advice given to a specific group of people that I'm naming. So I'm going to write an S for specific or subjunctive. Es necesario estar atento en el bote de vela. It's necessary to be attentive on a sailboat. Well, this is just general advice. There's not a specific person listed that needs to follow it. Número 2. No es bueno que nosotros hagamos ruido en las habitaciones. It's not good that we make noise in the rooms. This is specific advice given to us. So I'll write an S. Otra vez. Take 10 seconds. Work through the other 4 on your own. We'll correct them in just a moment. How did you do? ¿Está bien? S, G, S. Yeah. Pues, now that we know when to use the subjunctive, we have to know how do we use the subjunctive? How do we form this new mood that we're learning today? And the good news is it's pretty similar to something you've already learned. We learned about forming commands, usted commands, ustedes commands. The subjunctive works really similarly. So to form the present subjunctive, use the yo form of the present tense in the indicative. The present tense you learned in Spanish 1, and then change the ending to the opposite letter. We learned a rhyme when we learned commands. Go to yo, drop the yo, add the opposite ending. Hopefully that sounds familiar. Remember the opposite endings, like we learned with commands, means there's a different vowel on the end. So if we're talking about an AR verb, the opposite ending is going to have an E in it. If we're talking about an ER or an IR verb, the opposite ending will have an A in it. So to form the subjunctive mood of these 3 verbs, these are regular verbs in the subjunctive, we go to yo, drop the yo, add the opposite ending. And this recomiendo que is here as a reminder that we're not going to start a sentence with the subjunctive mood. The subjunctive mood is only really used after we've already had one verb conjugated in the indicative tense. I recommend that I talk, you talk, he talks, etc. Pues hablar is an AR verb, so go to yo, drop the yo, add the opposite ending. Hablo is the yo form in the present tense. We have to add the opposite ending, it would be hable. Hables in the two forms. Hable. The yo form and the L form in the subjunctive are the same. You can use context clues to tell what meaning is. Are we talking about he recommends that I talk, or he recommends that she talk? Or in the subjunctive, you might more commonly see subject pronouns yo, él, ella, usted, to make it clear who's being given a recommendation. Hablemos, habléis, hablen. Bien? Feel free to work ahead if you want. Aprender means to learn. Aprendo is the yo form in the present tense. So we drop the O and we have to add the opposite ending, which will be an A. Aprenda. Aprendas. Aprenda. Bien. Aprendamos. Aprendáis. Aprendan. I recommend that you guys learn Spanish. Recomiendo que aprendan el español. Escribir. Escribo is the yo form, but we drop the yo and add the opposite ending, which leaves us with escriba. Escribas. Escriba. Escribamos. Escribáis. Escriban. I recommend that you write your grandma thank you note. Recomiendo que escribas una carta a la abuela. Bien? Whew. This isn't on your paper, but it's here to remind me to tell you that it's kind of logical that the subjunctive is identical to commands. Negative to commands, usted commands, ustedes commands, it's kind of logical. Because commands have to do with one person influencing another, right? I'm commanding you to do something. And the subjunctive also is about one person influencing the actions of another. I recommend that you do this. I suggest that they do that. So it's kind of, it makes sense that they're very similar. The very first thing, part A, aquí está. Write the subjunctive ending for each of the verbs below, follow the model. So the model is yo, con asistir, asistar. Go to yo, drop the yo, add the opposite ending. The passengers, to board, aborden. You drink. I recommend that you drink more water. Por ejemplo, bebas. Do the rest on your own. Take 30 seconds. Check your work. How did you do? Viajemos. The flight to last. The flight is an it. In English, he, she, and it go together. We're going to use the ella form of the verb. Durar means to last, so it would be dure. The pilot recommends that the flight last as long as it needs to. I don't know, that's kind of a weird thing to put together as a recommendation. To con desear, to desire, to want. Desees. It looks weird to have that double E. Okay, tu desees, but that's how it would be. Desees, desees. Yo con vivir, viva. My parents want me to live closer. Quieren que yo viva más cercana. La familia is an it in Spanish. When we see the family as a subject of a sentence, we're going to use the he, she form of the verb, he, she, it. The family is planning, planeye. Planeye. I know it looks weird. Planeye. That's how it is. Nosotros con llevar. They recommend that we carry our backpacks. Llevemos. Recomiendan que llevemos las mochilas. How'd it go? ¿Está bien? On the back. Just like we learned with commands, go to yo, drop the yo, add the opposite ending, there are a number of irregulars in the subjunctive. Some of them are just totally irregular, and others are irregular because the yo form is irregular in the present tense, like tengo, hago, salgo, etc. And others are stem-changing verbs in the present tense, which means they have that same irregularity in the subjunctive mood. So some verbs that are just totally and completely irregular in the subjunctive will look kind of familiar. I recommend that you give dar. Las formas son de, des, de, demos, deis, den. And hopefully they look familiar because when we learned usted commands and ustedes commands and negative to commands, we saw some of these verb forms already. La forma yo y la forma el ella tiene acento. El verbo estar, to be. Like for how you feel and where you are, always use the verb estar. Esté, estés, esté. Estemos, estéis, estén. Hay acentos. Forma yo, tú, él, vosotros, ellos. Hay acentos. El verbo ir, you might be able to guess what the irregular subjunctive forms look like because they're really similar to the usted and ustedes commands. Vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, vayáis, vayan. Ir, to go. I recommend that you go to Mexico. Recomiendo que vayas a México. Saber means to know, like to know facts. We didn't learn this as a command, but the command forms of saber would be no sepas, sepa, no sepa, sepan, no sepan. Sepa, sepas, sepa, sepamos, sepáis, sepan. Ser means to be, like estar, but we use ser for descriptions, occupations, time, date, event, etc., relationships. Sea, seas, sea, seamos, seáis, sean. Está aquí. Actividad A. Read each sentence below and circle the verb in its subjunctive form. Then write the infinitive of the circled verb in the blank. Follow the model. I recommend that Anna gives you the boarding pass. De is a form of dar. I suggest that the passenger is here at 4 o'clock. Esté, en el subjuntivo, es una forma de estar. Como siempre, chicos. Work through the last 4. We'll give you 30 seconds and we'll check our work. Bien? Our next group of irregular verbs are cargar-zar verbs. Yay! We learned with cargar-zar verbs when we learned the preterite tense last year that they have a spelling change to preserve the correct sound in the yo form of the preterite, and also we saw the same spelling change in the commands, the usted and ustedes commands and the negative to commands. So for car verbs like buscar, the C changes to QU in the subjunctive mood. For example, I recommend that you search for your passport again because you need it. Recomiendo que busques el pasaporte otra vez. Busque, busques, busque. Busquemos, busquéis, busquen. Gar verbs, G-A-R, Have a spelling change from G to GU in the subjunctive mood. Llegar means to arrive. Llegue, llegues, llegue, lleguemos, lleguéis, lleguen. I recommend that you arrive at the airport 2 hours before your flight leaves. Recomiendo que llegues en el aeropuerto 2 horas antes de la salida. Zar verbs, on your paper it says empezar. I wasn't crazy about that example because empezar is a stem changing verb as well. So it's actually a double irregular verb. So for the sake of ease, let's replace empezar with casar because casar is just irregular in this one thing. The Z changes to C. Case, cases, case, casemos, caseis, casen. Por ejemplo, the DNR says that you cannot hunt, that you don't hunt after dark. El DNR dice que no cases después de atardecer. Part B, look at the sentences using the present subjunctive below. Underline the second verb in each, and then circle the spelling change in each verb that you underlined. The first one has been done for you. The teacher recommends that we take out more books from the library. La profesora recomienda que nosotros saquemos más libros de la biblioteca. Número 2. Yo necesito que ustedes paguen por los boletos hoy. I need that you guys pay for the tickets today. Paguen es el verbo en el subjuntivo. Heu es el cambio. Como siempre, do the rest on your own. We'll correct them in about 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. Bueno, vamos a corregir. It is recommended that the employees look for prohibited things. Busquen. The child wants that, desires that. The mom does not turn off the light. No apague. I prefer that you arrive on time. Llegues. The trainer, the coach, wants that the players play every day this week. Jueguen. This is a weird word. Jueguen. 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 Jugar, as we know, is a stem changing verb. U-to-U-E stem changer. And then in this case, in the subjunctive, there's also a G to GU spelling change. Mr. Vega prohibits that we touch the exhibits. Toquemos. Dad recommends that I dry my hands. Me seque. Again? Okay, let's power through. Stem changing verbs that are AR verbs and ER verbs are irregular in the subjunctive mood because if we follow the rule, go to yo, drop the O, add the opposite ending, the yo form has a stem change in that. So perder means to lose. Perder. It's an E to I stem changer. The yo form of the present tense is pierdo, I lose. We drop that O and go change the opposite ending. So we have pierda, pierdas, pierda, perdamos, perdais, pierdan. Just like in the present tense of the indicative that we learned in Spanish 1, in the nosotros form and vosotros form, there's no stem change. Remember, sometimes these are called boot verbs because the forms that have a stem change fit inside a shape that looks kind of like a boot. Jugar means to play a game or a sport. It's a U to UE stem changer. It's also a gar verb, so it's a double irregular. It has a stem change and also a spelling change. The G changes to GU. Juegue, juegues, juegue, juguemos, juguéis, jueguen. Otra vez, in the nosotros form and the vosotros form, there's no stem change in the subjunctive mood. for AR verbs and for ER verbs. Recordar means to remember. It's an OTUE stem changer, and it follows a similar pattern. 4 forms in the boot show a stem change. The 2 forms outside of the boot, the nosotros and vosotros form, do not have a stem change. Recuerde, recuerda, recuerdes, recuerde, recordemos, recordéis, recuerden. Verbs that are AR verbs and ER verbs that have a stem change in the present tense that we learned in Spanish 1 work pretty similarly in the subjunctive mood. There's still a stem change, and they follow the same pattern where the nosotros and vosotros forms do not have a stem change. Vamos a practicar. Estamos en el paquete, página 303. Parte A. Dice aquí, read each sentence and complete the verb with the correct stem changing vowels. Follow the model. Model is recordar. Es necesario que usted recuerde la dirección. It's necessary that you remember the address. You'll have to remember what kind of stem changing verbs these are. Take a stab at it. We'll correct it in about 30 seconds. Numero 1 reads, it's important that you turn on the lights before you enter. Numero 2, the teacher wants that Simon starts with the test now. 3, it's better that you count the money outside of the shop. 4, it's good that you guys can visit so many places. Numero 5, it's bad weather, but it's better that it doesn't rain during the baseball game. We're almost done. Just a little more. I are stem changing verbs, the very last part on your notes packet. They can be very tricky because stem changing verbs that end in IR in the present tense of the indicative have stem changes in all forms of the present subjunctive, including the nosotros and vosotros form. So these are super weird. Like, we're not used to stem changing verbs having a stem change in the nosotros and vosotros form. It is only for IR verbs like pedir, divertir, dormir. Pedir is an E to I stem changer in the present tense and also in the subjunctive present tense. So the E changes to I in all 6 forms. The yo form of the present tense indicative is pido. I ask for, I order. So drop the O, go to yo, drop the O, add the oxygen in. Pida, pidas, pida, pidamos, pidáis, pidan. So we can't draw a boot around this anymore. Instead, it looks more like a snowshoe. Haha, funny joke. Haha, snowshoe, because it's like big and flat, right? I know, it's not funny. Divertirse means to have fun. It's a reflexive verb. So remember, with a reflexive verb, the se moves to the front. We change it to me, te, se, nos, o, se. And then we conjugate the rest of the verb. Divertirse is an E to I E stem changing verb in the present tense of the indicative and also in the 4 forms in the boot, in the subjunctive mood. In the subjunctive, it's an E to I stem changer in the nosotros and vosotros form. So what we are left with is me divierta, te diviertas, se divierta, nos divertamos, os divertáis, se diviertan. Otra vez. Inside the boot, in the subjunctive, there's an E to IE stem change. Outside the boot, in the subjunctive, there's an E to I stem change. Dormir is kind of similar. It means to sleep. Inside the boot, in the subjunctive, there's an O to UE stem change. Outside the boot, there's an O to U stem change. Duerma, duermas, duerma, duermamos, duermáis, duerman. Y otra vez, vamos a practicar esta cosa en el paquete de práctica. En la página 304, which is one of the last pages, it does say, complete the following sentences using the present subjunctive of the IR stem changing verbs in parentheses. Follow the model. Pedir means to ask for. It's necessary that you guys ask for help. Pidan, ayuda. Número dos, repetir, to repeat. The tourists want that the guide repeats the explanation. So repetir is an E to I stem changer. So it's going to change E to I in all 6 forms. That's kind of irrelevant for us because the guide is just one person. We're going to use that ella form of the subjunctive of repetir. Repita. Repita. Número dos. Deseamos que nuestros parientes bien. We desire that our relatives feel well or feel good. Sentirse is a reflexive verb, so we have to move the se to the front. The subject is our relatives. We're going to use the ellos form of the verb, so we don't have to change the se. Me, te, se, nos, o, se. It just stays the same. We have to move it to the front. Sentir is an E to IE stem changer in the present indicative and in the present subjunctive. We're using the ellos form, and it's an IR verb. Se sientan bien, that they feel good. Divertirse, to have fun. Nuestros padres quieren que nosotros mucho. Our parents want that we have a lot of fun. Otra vez, the se in this reflexive verb moves to the front. The subject of the second phrase is nosotros, so we have to change the se. Me, te, se, nos, o, se, right? Nos. Divertirse is an E to IE stem changer, but in this case, we're using the nosotros form, so it's an E to I stem change outside of the boot. So we are left with divert, because this E changes to I, and then we have to use the opposite ending, so it'll be amos, divertamos. Mucho. Bien. Número 4, it's important that we follow the instructions. Nosotros, seguir, is an E to I stem changer. And E to I stem changers have a stem change in all forms. All 6. Sigamos. Bien. It's better that Felipe and Ana sleep on the plane. Dormir is an O to UE stem changer. It's an O to U stem changer in the nosotros and vosotros form, but that's kind of irrelevant for us because we're going to use the ellos form. So we'll use the U to UE stem change. Ooh. Duerman. Terminamos.